This episode is sponsored by Front-End Masters. Engineers have watched over 2 million hours of Front-End Masters videos to upgrade their skills in the latest best practices in front-end development and Node.js. Popular video courses of theirs include courses on advanced JavaScript, Angular 2, React, API design with Node, and functional and asynchronous JavaScript. Many of their teachers have even been guests on JavaScript Jabber. Check them out at frontendmasters.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 248 of the JavaScript Jabber Show. This week on our panel we have Joe Eames.
Hey everybody.
We have a guest panelist, Tracy Lee.
Hi there.
We have a special guest, and that is Ben Lesh.
Hey everybody.
I guess I should say I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Ben Lesh, as you said. I work at Netflix, and I also have a side job working for Rx Workshop and working with Tracy on this dot. So I'm the lead author on RxJS, so RxJS 5 in particular. So it's kind of a lot of my life recently.
Did you say you're working with Tracy on this dot what?
Exactly.
Is that like that conference? Which conference? That conference.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. But I also think it's funny, Ben, that you're like, I'm working for Rx Workshop when it's your thing.
Yeah.
Like,
well, Tracy, I don't know. She's
I'm
basically
ready.
my manager. Yeah, she keeps me in line. I work for Tracy.
Nice.
That is the most horrifying thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
So now that we've thoroughly confused the listener, do you want to explain a little bit about RxJS and Rx Workshop and what those are about?
Sure. So RxJS is it's basically about a async type called observables. So observables are very similar to a promise, but they can have more than one notification. A lot of times when people talk about reactive programming, what they're really talking about is RxJS, at least when they're talking about it in context of JavaScript. And RxJS has been adopted by, it gets used by an awful lot of people, but it's most famously adopted by Angular in the latest incarnation of Angular, which I'm told we are not allowed to call Angular 2 anymore. But it's the only dependency actually for Angular. So there's a bit of a paradigm shift when you're talking about reactive programming. You have to kind of change how you think about it. So Rx Workshop is a workshop designed by myself to help people learn how to think reactively, how to program reactively, and how to use observables and all these fancy operators that we've got included in RxJS.
So why is it so hard? I mean, let's back up. What is reactive programming?
Reactive programming, if you want me to oversimplify it, it's kind of a event-based programming. So what you would have is at any given point, you subscribe to some event, and then it pushes an event at you, and then you react to it, and then you send it on its way. So with observables, you have an observable which produces values over time, and you can have all these operators, like you can map and filter and zip two observables together and these sorts of things to create various effects in your program, basically to write applications. And reactive programming is a little different from imperative programming because the idea is it's a bit more functional. What you're looking at doing is kind of controlling the flow of your application through these observables, and trying to limit the side effects that your application flow has until you're ready to actually produce side effects. So where imperative programming, which is what most people are used to, you kind of call a function, you set some state somewhere, and then somewhere else you call another function that reads the state. And there's a lot more to test. It's a little bit different with reactive programming, which is declarative.
So is there a difference between functional reactive programming and reactive programming? Because I've heard the two terms, and I know they're related, but
there is and there isn't. So functional reactive programming it's a term coined by Conal Elliott a long time ago, and it's got these ideas around time and timing of events that are a little different than what you would see with RxJS. But at the end of the day, so many people call RxJS functional reactive programming that they're basically the same thing. I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs to call one thing, and so like they both involve transforming data that arrives via events reactively. They both are functional. One has more definitions around around the timing aspect of it in white papers or whatever that were written back in the day, but I don't think anyone expects most people in front-end web development to know a lot of that stuff. So functional reactive programming is totally fine. Reactive programming actually does have, so RxJS is push-based reactive programming, right? So it pushes values at you. You can have pull-based reactive programming, and you'll see those things in like Ember's object model or with computed properties or MobX. Those sorts of paradigms are more pull-based reactive programming.
So what does RxJS actually do for you then? Because we're kind of talking somewhat conceptually here. You have observers, and when something pops out of the observer, from what I understand, then you do something with it.
Yeah, so RxJS, what it really does is it has a lot of what are called operators off of this observable type. And what an observable really is at its root is it's just a function that takes an observer. An observer is an object with three methods on it. So you can think of it like three different callbacks: next, error, and complete. So next gets fired every time a new value arrives. Complete gets fired whenever you're done producing data and you just want to close things out. Error gets fired when you're done producing data because of an error and you want to close things out. And what this enables you to do is to have this observable that allows you to treat events as sets of things, right? So you can say, here's my set of mouse clicks. Here's my set of values I've pulled out of this array. Here's my set of WebSocket things that have arrived, or my set of Ajax values, which is just going to be one value and then it's going to complete. But there's a same shapedness to these sets that enable you to do things like you can concat two sets together, just like you can with an array, because of various set algebras. And then you've got other things like you can zip, you can flat map, where you kind of map your set into a set of sets and then flatten it back out into a single set again. And all these sets are observables. The unique thing about observables, as opposed to other sets that you might deal with, is there's an element of timing involved because they're event-based, because they're pushing values at you. So unlike an iterator where you're synchronously kind of pulling values out, this is asynchronously pushing values at you. So you've got all sorts of other operations that revolve around the temporal nature of this thing. So you could say delay all the values that are arriving with a delay operator, or you could throttle or buffer and that sort of thing over these sets.
I think the thing that gets me excited, so sometimes when Ben talks about these things, it like completely, I'm like, what? It doesn't make any sense to me, reactive programming. But I made him sit down with me one day. And what gets me excited, even though I only know very basic functionality of how to play with RxJS, is the idea that it's like a language, correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, but it's a language on top of JavaScript. Are you smiling? Because I'm like trying to explain this.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right.
It's like, so it's a language on top of JavaScript. And what it allows people to do is like developers and teams are able to like learn RxJS instead of something in a framework. And they're able to like code within this and not have to learn a bunch of different things. And you're able to create like one thing that looks exactly the same, so that when it talks to all the APIs, you don't have to like continuously change.
Right. So yeah, RxJS has all of these operators effectively create a domain-specific language on top of JavaScript. So you've got concepts like flat map or merge map, switch map, and these other things that, when you haven't been using it, it sounds a little confusing, but that's because, these are sort of keywords in RxJS, not necessarily built over top of JavaScript, but these are like functions you would call off of observable that return new observables. And what it really enables you to do is you can do things like you could have a multiplexed WebSocket in 3 lines of code. And that's where you've got a
Can you explain
WebSocket.
what that is, a multiplex WebSocket?
Right. So multiplexing a WebSocket. So if you're getting multiple data streams via WebSocket, what you don't want to do is you don't want to connect. Maybe you do, but this isn't very efficient. You don't want to really connect multiple WebSocket instances for each data stream, because while you're only using 4 sockets on your client, you're going to be using 4 sockets per client on the server. So everybody that connects to that server is going to, it's not going to scale well. Like, you only have a finite number of WebSocket connections you can maintain on a server. So what you do is you say, well, what if I take all of these data streams and I, funnel them over the same WebSocket, just a single WebSocket connection, and I have them keyed by something to help you identify the packets on the client end. There's some complexity around that, in that when you get your first data stream, you have to say, do I have a WebSocket connection? If you don't, then you connect to the WebSocket. Then you have to wait for it to fire an event to tell you that it's connected. Then you send a subscription message to the server to tell it which pieces of data you're interested in. And then you have to filter out those pieces of data. The second time you have the second time you want data, you're going to say, oh, well, I've already got a WebSocket connection. I just need to send my subscription message and start pulling those back. And when you're done with either one of those data streams, you're going to have to send an unsubscribe message over the wire to tell the server to stop sending the data. And when you get down to only one data stream left, and that one's done, then you want to disconnect the socket. And so there's a lot of complexity around that, especially when you go to reconnect. You have to track what all you were subscribed to on the server. So that way, if you lose network connectivity or something like that, you can reconnect the WebSocket and send all the subscription messages again and begin refiltering out those values. This is something, if you were to try to implement imperatively, is going to be, maybe a couple hundred lines of code. It's gonna be substantial. Where with RxJS, in particular RxJS 5, you're looking at 5 to 8 lines of code, something like that, to implement that sort of idea. So it's the real thing with Rx is it takes these takes complicated when you've got really complicated event composition, say things like drag and drop, or the type ahead autocomplete type functionality you see on some websites. Those things are very, very easy to do in RxJS because it's a domain specific language built for combining different event streams, where doing it imperatively with JavaScript can get buggy, and it's a little bit more complicated.
Do you have an actual example of doing this kind of thing? With a system, so you get, just kind of walk us through the workflow, because I'm still having a little bit of trouble kind of visualizing in my head how all the pieces fit together.
So one example would be drag and drop is a pretty simplistic example, where you have let's say it's like a div or something on your page, and you want to, just plain and simple, you want to be able to mouse down on it, move it however far, and then let go of your mouse button and leave it there, or fire some event when that's done. What you can do with that is you're actually composing 3 different sets of events. One is the mouse down on that target, on that div. The other is mouse movements on the document after you've moused down on the div, but only until you mouse up somewhere on the document. So those are the 3 different events. There's mouse downs on the target, mouse movements on the document, and mouse up on the document. And what you can do is you get an observable of each one of those things. And observables don't do anything until you subscribe to them. So once you subscribe to them, you start getting streams of events from them. And you can say, take this stream of target mouse down events. So when someone mouse downs on a target, and then you switch map it into document mouse movements that you only take until there's a document mouse up. And what that means is you'll have this observable of document mouse movements, but only when you actually click on that div and start moving it. Then you'll all of a sudden you get these mouse movement events if you were to subscribe to the result of that. And with that, you can move the div around. Say on the last one, do something different, that sort of thing. So it depends on what you're going to do with your drag and drop. But you're looking at implementing a drag and drop in basically 1-2 lines of code, as opposed to the imperative drag and drop, which gets a little hairy because you have to make sure that you're adding and removing event listeners properly. You mess that up, you've got some memory leaks where RxJS is just going to take care of that for you.
So basically, it solves every problem, and it's awesome. And it's the best thing ever since sliced bread, right?
Yeah. It totally solves every problem. So, all right. So the flip side is knowing when not to RxJS things. Right? So most of the time, RxJS is great for. There's another thing that it does for you that's pretty good.
Can I interject something here?
Yeah, go.
Which is, and this is like part of this question to answer, and that is, are promises now dead?
No, promises aren't dead. In fact, promises are actually used as part of the observable API. If you subscribe to an observable with for each, you get a promise back. And that promise resolves when the observable is complete or if there's an error in it. The other interesting thing about subscribing with for each is if you have an error in your next handler, it's going to get forwarded along to that promise. So currently, if you have an error in your next handler, it will throw. Future versions of RxJS are unlikely to do this because the observable proposal that's before the TC39 is not going to do this. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But yeah, promises are not dead. Promises have a lot of really great use cases. The problem with promises, and this is actually the thing I was going to get to, that's another good feature of observables in RxJS, is promises don't have cancellation. So if you follow what's happening in the TC39 at all, there was a promise cancellation proposal by Dominic Denicola. I thought it was pretty solid, mostly because I kind of liked cancellation tokens as an observable author. It was going to make my life easier if cancellation tokens were everywhere. Because they would be fairly ergonomic, but that's a different story. But the problem with promises is you can't cancel them. By the time someone hands you a promise, there's no way to say, you better stop doing whatever you're doing. So if the promise is wrapping, say, an XHR, there's no way to call abort on the XHR, really, with your root level promise, unless you've set that up ahead of time when you made the promise to begin with. And you can do that with things like Bluebird or composing promises together. It's kind of advanced, but at the end of the day, 99 times out of 100, you can't cancel whatever you've gotten from this promise, which means that you're going to have, HTTP requests that go out and they come back and you don't care about them anymore, maybe because you've got a single page app and someone navigated to a tab or a view. And then before the view data came back, they navigate to a different view. And then the data comes back and it starts kind of processing that data. So the XHR2, which is XML HTTP request, the newer versions are going to actually examine the content header and be like, hey, this is JSON/application. I know what to do with this. I'm going to parse it, and that's going to block your UI thread. There's going to be garbage collection afterwards. What you really want to do is be able to call abort, so it doesn't do any of that stuff. And with observables, you do that. It's generally the default behavior of any observable you set up to be able to tear down whatever is producing data when you unsubscribe from it, where with promises, that's not the default. Like you would have to go through some hoops to make sure that was working right in promises.
What about all this Angular excitement with RxJS? And we were playing around with, I thought it was so amazing to see that Firebase uses RxJS by default.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it totally, I think that for Firebase, it makes total sense to use observable or some observable type. RxJS, is definitely the most popular, but it's, since Firebase has this idea of pushing updates to you, push-based API like observables works really, really well. And I want to go back and touch on the same typedness, as I said, of I'm doing air quotes, same typedness of observables. One of the things that's interesting about observables is if you think about, you can represent any number of values being 0 to infinity over any amount of time, being like instantaneously or an infinite amount of time, and you can it can embody the setup of whatever's producing those values and the tear down of whatever's producing those values. I mean, really, you can represent just about anything with an observable. There are some things that are a little harder to represent with it, but by and large, you can represent just about anything with an observable. And that means that if you have, let's say you have an API and it accepts an observable of values that generally you're giving, maybe it's some stream where you're polling some HTTP endpoint over and over again on an interval, and you've represented this stream of values as a single observable. Later on, you decide, no, I want to get this from SSE or WebSockets. You can just switch that out, and since the interface is exactly the same, it's an observable. You don't have to change any other code to consume it. You could have your data generated by mouse movements or text inputs or whatever you want, and you don't really need to change your APIs because they're accepting an observable, which could be just about anything, as long as the values that were coming through obviously were what you wanted to consume.
So basically, you're uniting all of computer science through observables.
Yeah. So what gets hard with observables actually is when you're talking about things like back pressure, which most people in web development, front-end web development in particular, don't have to deal with very often. Usually that's more of a server-side thing. And what back pressure is when you say, oh, you give me a value, I process it in some expensive way, and then when I'm done, I tell you I'm ready for a new value. And what works really well for that is like an iterable. But when you're dealing with async values, then you've got then you're looking at probably like an iterator of promise is a little bit better for back pressure. So that would be async iterators, or like the async function star stuff that Dominic DeNicola is also working on for JavaScript. It's very, very cool. The reason that it's different from observable, the reason that observable works really well for front-end web development, though, is you can't really use async iterators for, say, mouse movements, because you wouldn't want to allocate a promise for every single, event on a mouse movement. I'm sure most of your listeners have subscribed to a mouse movement before and console logged it out and just watched it spam the bejesus out of their console. You don't want to allocate a promise for every single one of those. That would be a little too expensive. Where an observable is just going to call, a callback function for you. So it's not an iterator of promise isn't very great for targeting event target type things like DOM elements and that sort of thing.
All right. So I think there's another, in my personal opinion, hard thing about observables in RxJS, and that is the documentation.
Yeah.
This is a call out for contributors. Please contribute to RxJS documentation.
Yeah, I put a bounty
isn't part
out.
of the problem that there's multiple sources that aren't necessarily correct, or there's different versions?
Yeah, so right now RxJS 5, which is the new version going forward, it's in a different repository for a few reasons actually. The original version of RxJS was written by Matt Podwosecki. He's the creator of RxJS, and this is, I think, 9 years ago now or something like that. And it was a straight port of Rx.net. So it has things like schedulers called current thread scheduler, which, in JavaScript doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you only have one thread anyways. it's the documentation around it was kind of built for those names and those things, and some of those things didn't make a lot of sense. And then when you have the observable proposal that's before the TC39, and my involvement there is actually my teammate Jafar Hussain is the champion of that proposal, or one of the champions of that proposal. That is different from what RxJS is, but not RxJS 4 and under is, but not by much. We decided we would rebuild RxJS, one, to be a little bit more performant, because Netflix has some pretty tight performance constraints where we use RxJS on our front ends for things like smart TVs and stuff like that. And two, to kind of target that observable proposal, to make sure that we have an Rx that aligns with what's going to land in the future of JavaScript. And I think that's a lot of what sold using observables to the Angular crowd. The other thing that you're going to, I think, see observables get used for in the future is actually in browsers. I know some of the browser vendors were talking about being able to hook into DOM events as observables. And so instead of saying, add event listener, click or whatever, you would say on click or whatever their API is going to be for the DOM, and you would get an observable of clicks. So this observable is like right now they're really catching on. They're here to stay. But there's some mind bending to go around. If you really want to get the power out of Rx and out of observables, you're going to have to kind of unlearn what you've learned a little bit. But you can start small too. You could use observables almost exactly as you've used promises in the past, or use them very imperatively. Just subscribe to them and set some state, and then go and do whatever you're going to do normally if you want. But it's definitely coming in the future of JavaScript. RxJS 5 was written to kind of aim towards that future and be a little bit more performant. And the result of that is we have document misalignment, where some of the docs, if you go to reactive dash extensions on GitHub, those are the older docs, and they're a little bit more complete because they've been around for a while than the newer docs for RxJS 5, which are on reactivex.io/RxJS. So there's been a lot of work done on that. I have a bounty on it. My bounty was if you help document 2 operators, I will send you an RxJS shirt. The bounty still stands. So I don't know how far along with it. That did get a lot of submissions in, but we haven't merged them all yet. So,
ooh, I want a shirt.
You'll get a shirt.
Do I have to merge things? Maybe. I'll do it with you. Wait.
You had one PR. You do have one PR contributor technically.
Hey, could I have you explain one thing that I think is potentially one of the most common confusions, and that is hot and cold?
Okay. So hot and cold, they're almost terrible names, but an observable is cold if when you subscribe to it, it creates the thing that's going to produce data for it. So if the act of subscribing to it creates a new WebSocket, for example, and starts pumping values out of it from that WebSocket, then it is cold. An observable is hot if when you subscribe to it, whatever's producing data for it already existed. So for example, if you have a button on a page that's producing click events, and then you make an observable out of it, it's technically a hot observable because the button already existed and was already creating click events long before you ever subscribed to your observable. Where, the counter example would be like an interval or something like that. So you have an observable that creates a new interval when you subscribe to it and starts pumping out values 1, 2, 3, so on. Because it's creating the interval when you subscribe to it, it's cold. So the default state for most observables is cold for the most part. And that is because you can make a cold observable hot, but you cannot make a hot observable cold, if that makes sense. Because how are you going to create? Because observables are just functions, and if you had a function that wrapped something else that was producing data, how are you going to create another function that somehow creates that other thing your first function is wrapping? You can't do it. It's a chicken or egg problem at that point. Does that make any sense? I mean, it's a hard thing to explain for sure. But nutshell, hot observables wrap something that's already producing values. Cold observables create the thing that's producing values when you subscribe to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. I got one other thing I want to ask about.
Yeah.
And that is why is there so many freaking requests? When I include RxJS in my library or in my application, it makes like 50 gazillion requests. Why is that?
Wait. So when you include RxJS in your application, all of a sudden you have more like HTTP requests? Or
yeah, so it like requests all these RxJS files, right? It'll request like 400 different RxJS files, one for each operation. Could you go over what that is and why that is and how to deal with that?
Well, we'll have to look at how your app is put together, I suppose. What I suspect is that just to back up a little bit, the way that RxJS 5 is structured is there's a lot of different operators, and most people aren't going to use all of them. They'll use like 8 or so. Mm-hmm. And so what people end up doing is what people really want to do is they want to just build like a bundle, or when they go bundle with Webpack or whatever, they want to only include the operators they care about. So what we did for this, and this is an idea actually that came from the Angular team, was we have these patch modules where you can say import RxJS /add/operator/map or add operator filter and so on. So you can kind of build the ideal operator for your app. And if you're bundling this properly, that bundled bit should just be built in with your app and you'll be able to use that. However, if you're in a situation where you've bundled things to kind of lazy load, then I'm going to assume that it's going to end up hosting each one of those add operator files that patch the observable prototype to have those operators. It's going to end up, hosting those separately. And then when it goes to lazy load specific modules, it ends up saying, oh, I also need these RxJS operators. And so you're pulling it down via Ajax. That's actually an uncommon case. I hadn't really heard that one, but that's, it's kind of advanced RxJS use case. So if you're just playing with it, you can always pull in the entire bundle, which brings all the operators that exist to the table. But if you're trying to limit your download size by reducing the number of operators you're actually, bundling and sending out with your app, then you're going to want to use something like Webpack or what have you to in these patch modules to just patch your observable to only have the specific operators on that you care about.
Let's take a break from this episode and really quickly talk about finding a job. Searching for a job can feel stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through an interview process just to find out that the very end that the salary offer or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Well, there's a solution. Hired.com is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities. They make the job search faster, focused, and stress-free instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best. Hired puts you in control of how and when you connect with compelling opportunities. And after completing one simple application, top employers apply to you. And the best part is that you get money. That's right. They pay you if you get a job through them. Listeners to this show can earn double their normal hiring bonus by signing up with the show's link. That's right, you get $2,000 instead of $1,000. So go sign up at hired.com/JavaScriptJabber. I had to step out for a minute. Can you create your own operators for observables?
Yeah, absolutely. You can create your own. there's an operator really is nothing more than it's a method that you put on observable that generally subscribes to this, which is your observable, inside of a returned observable. So you have to say observable a lot there. So it's a method on observable that returns a new observable that when you subscribe to it, subscribes to the source and like does something with it and sends it along. So for example, like a map operator. A map operator, you'd have a method that said named map, and you pass some projection function to it, like your actual mapping function, and then you would return new observable, and inside of that you would subscribe to this, which is the context for your method, and you would pass to it an observer that when it got values, put that map function to use, got the mapped value, and then forwarded it along to the observer that you got when you subscribed. Does that make sense? It's a little easier to read. It's not much code when you actually look at the code, but that's basically all an operator is a method on observable that returns a new observable.
Right. And the observable is just a stream of data over time, so it just transforms the data that it's getting out of it. Right.
It's just pushing values at you via this next method.
Right. So for example, I could, if I have something pushing numbers up to me, and it could be 3, 4, 4, and and then I could have it translated so that it's row your boat, row your boat, or whatever,
right,
to map it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Getting jiggy with it.
It's like every app I write usually it relates to children's songs, I think. No, I do actually do that a lot. I think if you look through the unit tests in RxJS, there's unit tests where I have it saying like duck, duck, goose, and all sorts of silly things.
This is the hazards of being a dad, or the benefits, because songs.
If you can't write tests that are at least remotely funny, then I don't know, what are you doing with your time?
What about that fun operator you wrote, that bouncy one? The one that bounces up.
Bouncy. Oh. So I'm working on a reactive data visualization library that it's very much in prototype phase right now, but basically there's like a tween operator that you can say, give an easing function to, like a bounce in or bounce out. Mm-hmm. And if you give it a set of values, it'll tween all those values on an animation frame. So you can get kind of D3 like animation effects. But it should work a lot better with other people's frameworks because it doesn't rely on the DOM as much. But yeah, it's my new kind of pet project around this. I'm pretty excited about it. I did a lot of data viz work here at Netflix when I first started. Now I'm actually working on the UI platform team, so which is hiring, by the way. Shameless plug, but working on Falcor and RxJS. So now I do a lot more kind of back end to the front end sort of thing. But Falcor actually uses RxJS.
So like if I want a rainbow operator, I can get one.
A rainbow operator, yes. Yes, I think we could do that. We could.
Yes.
It would just map to like rainbow emojis or something.
Nice.
Okay, so I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
It's very often that you've got a observable, right? Like I'm thinking maybe just a simple HTTP request. And you want to manipulate, format the data that's coming back, right? You want to do something about it. So you want to adjust it just a little bit. Now, oftentimes I see people using map, but there's also like for each and do. So what's the right thing that I should be using when I'm working with this?
If you're just scrubbing the values into something else, you want to use map.
Okay.
For each will actually subscribe to the observable. So that's going to start your observable doing things. Do.
Oh, that's interesting. I had no idea that was true.
Yeah. So for each and subscribe are both the same thing with slightly different semantics. So for each just takes a next handler and returns to you a promise. So it's like a non-cancelable way to call an observable. And then when you have like do, for example, is an operator. So calling do won't subscribe to the observable. It's basically an outlet for side effects. So it gives you a value. You can do whatever you want to it, but it's not going to actually change the value when it forwards it along. Like I wouldn't mutate objects in there, obviously, because that's going to change for the next thing down the pipe. But presuming that you put some function in there that updates external state or whatever, that's what do is for. It's for producing side effects. So updating, $ scope or something in Angular 1 or whatever you're doing, you can do that in a do block. For each, you would also use to do side effects. However, for each, again, actually subscribes to the observable, where do does not. And then map is purely for taking a value, transforming it in some way into a new stream of values. So that's map is where you really want to do that. And actually, when you're as long as we're on the topic, when you talk about you get some stream of values and you want to scrub it. A lot of RxJS is just that. You get some stream of values, or streams plural of values, and you combine them and scrub them and combine them and scrub them until you get a stream of the exact values that your application expects. And then you give that to your application, and then it then subscribes to it in some way and creates side effects where you're updating, the DOM, or you're sending, requests out, or whatever it's doing with those values. But that's a lot of what RxJS is about, is taking a stream of values and transforming it into a stream of values that you expect. So if you expect numbers and you're getting a stream of AJAX responses, clearly you're going to have to take that AJAX response, glean some number out of it, and then you have an observable of numbers.
So I think that's most of my main questions. I've worked with RxJS a bit, with Angular 2, of course. And I definitely found it to be one of the harder things about moving to Angular 2. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, I know that there's a lot of benefits to it, but just the mental map for people that are moving from, promises were hard enough to get a grasp on, but now all of a sudden there's RxJS, right? Like, how do people get around that, get over that hump, and start really feeling comfortable?
Well, to start off with, what you want to do is just to start off, don't freak out. Don't worry about all the operators and doing it the proper Rx way. Right to start, what you can start off with is just get your observable, subscribe to it, get the values out, stuff them in some state, or do whatever you're going to do with it, just like you would with any other callback or promises or whatever made your life easiest. And from there, you can get into like map and filter, which you might be familiar with from array, kind of get your feet wet, and then you can start exploring other operators like merge map and these other things that where it starts to get a little bit more powerful. If you're doing this and you still find yourself confused, there's a lot of good resources out there. Again, I run a workshop, RX workshop on this. We do it how many times a year? 4 or 5 times a year, Tracy?
Something like that, yeah. Online and in person. So I think the next one's coming up January, 19th?
Yeah. So I mean, if you still need help, you can always sign up for one of my workshops. But other than that, I recommend just playing with it in JS bin by itself. Like don't worry too much about the Angular side of it. Just play with it and write things out to console and see what you get. The more you do that, the more you'll kind of understand the concepts. And then the only other thing is, I can tell you that once you start diving into it, try not to have, learn about side effects, and try not to have any side effects outside of a do block or a do operator rather, or like a for each or a subscribe. Like keep all your side effects there. Don't do side effects from within map. And what I mean by a side effect is whenever you affect something that's outside of the scope of your function, right? So if you call a function and it's writing to window.foo or something like that, that's a side effect. Or if it's even technically calling console log is a side effect, although that one's pretty innocuous. That's where you're usually just debugging or something like that. But that's try to keep your side effects to do blocks. And And other than that, just kind of play with the operators and see how they work.
I was surprised you didn't say something like do stick to your do blocks or.
What about existing coursework and tutorials and stuff like that? What are some of your favorites or ones that you at least know about for people to learn RxJS?
Let's see. Jafar Hussain put together an RX tutorial. It's a little outdated because it uses, I think, like RX2 or something like that right now. But most of the concepts are pretty familiar. There's also a good amount of courses on Egghead.io, which I think a lot of the kind of beginner ones are free. So that's a good place to go check things out. And then other than that, we've really been trying to put an effort into make sure there's solid real world-ish examples on ReactiveX.io. So you can go out and kind of see those sorts of things in action. Really, though, I mean, if anyone else is like me, what I had to do was I literally had to play with it, read up on a few of the operators, ask questions online. I'm highly available on Twitter. Usually people who email me questions about RX, I try to answer them as best I can. Every now and then I get one where someone wants me to basically write their app for them. I'm not going to do that. But if they need some advice on which way to go or which operator to use, I'm usually game for that. There's also a kind of a choose your own adventure operator picker on reactivex.io/RxJS. But yeah, I mostly just recommend people play around with it. Like get an observable.interval, so you have like a steady stream of values coming in, so you don't need Ajax or something like that, and just understand that observables are all the same shape. They have a few different traits. Like an observable of 1, 2, 3 is going to happen synchronously. An observable interval is going to happen asynchronously when you subscribe to it. But all in all, I mean, they still behave very similarly when you're talking about all the operators and stuff. So I would just get a junk observable like that, play with it, see how some of the operators work that you might not be familiar with, and
that's another difference between observables or RxJS and promises, right? Is that promises by definition have to be asynchronous and observables don't, right?
Yeah, they're forced into asynchrony. One of the things with observables is that the industry would like to use observables to model event target, for example. And it's actually a little known fact that you can. So event target is the API that they put on all DOM elements. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you can take a DOM element, you can add an event listener to it. You can then trigger that event totally synchronously and then remove that event listener also totally synchronously. And even if that event handler throws, even though everything happens synchronously, it doesn't actually bubble up to the block that you're in. So that it doesn't actually rethrow. It actually just reports that to like window on error or something like that. But so the fact that you can synchronously subscribe, emit a value, and unsubscribe from any DOM event, and you want to be able to model DOM events as observables, means that observables have to have that possibly synchronous type behavior. So I think with promises, one of the things they were worried about, and the reason that it forces asynchrony, is because they're worried about this Zalgo concept. And what Zalgo is I think it's like a Lovecraft demon thing, but you summon it whenever you have a behavior that's sometimes synchronous and sometimes asynchronous, because you can say, have some state here, like up at the top of your code block, and then call some function that's sometimes synchronous, sometimes asynchronous with its callback, alter that state, and then underneath it, check the state again. And if it's synchronous, it's going to behave differently than if it's asynchronous. And so it causes kind of a weird non-deterministic behavior for people in some odd bugs if they have that. However, if you're using observables properly and making sure that you're controlling your side effects you're not really going to have that problem, because you could have this problem with just basic functions too. Like it's not a problem that's unique to observables. Any function could have this problem. Promises don't, because they force you into asynchrony all the time, which comes with some overhead. It comes with some cost.
So one thing that I've heard a few people do is they've said that Redux and RxJS are similar. Can you talk about some of the similarities or differences there, or is that completely wild?
No, it's a real thing. So Redux is built around this idea that you can use reducers, and what a reducer is, it's a function that gives you state and a value and expects you to return new state. And the Redux stores are built around this. So every time you dispatch an action, it calls this reducer with the current state and the action you just dispatched, and it expects you to return a new state. And then that triggers an event that you can subscribe to and then get this new state and do something with it. So that's kind of Redux's whole model. RxJS, we obviously have the concept of subscribing to events. So if we just had a stream of state, it would be roughly the same thing. And how we get that is you can have a subject, which is an observable you can kind of call next to push values into. And then you can use scan, and scan takes a reducer. And it's exactly the same as the reducer that you would see in Redux. And then it's going to return an observable of that state. So the scan reducer gives you state and whatever action you pushed into your subject, and it expects you to return new state. And then you have a stream of state. So it's basically the same thing. So Redux stores could be written in one line of code with RxJS as a scan. However, we actually here at Netflix on a team the team I used to be on with Jay Phelps, and I know there's other teams around here that are doing the same thing, actually use Redux and Rx together, because Redux has a lot of really great tooling. Redux is really lightweight for what it's doing, where like a couple of observables with scan isn't necessarily, I mean, it's still really, really fast, but it's not quite as lightweight. The biggest thing is the tooling and the community around Redux. And so there's a piece of middleware that I wrote with Jay Phelps that is called Redux Observable. And what it enables you to do is use Rx alongside of Redux to handle all of your asynchronous needs. So Redux doesn't do anything asynchronous by default. Because if you think about it, you dispatch an action and then it synchronously updates some state and synchronously tells you that it's updated state, and then you synchronously do something with it. There's no room for async anywhere in there. So there's lots of different middlewares that people use to handle these things, and Redux Observable is one of them, and it enables you to use RxJS to do these things, because RxJS is really good at debouncing and throttling and all sorts of async composition, where there's no concept like that in Redux.
Well, I don't think I have any other questions. Do you, Joe?
Well, no. I think that's
I have a question.
Go.
All right. Can we sing the Rubber Ducky song, Ben?
What? I don't have the lyrics to the... Oh my God.
That's right. I had them ready.
You're going to make me sing on JS Jabber? These. Yeah. What if their listeners aren't quite used to our sort of shenanigans?
Joe and Charles have never heard us sing together. So we're going to sing the Rubber Ducky song. Let's do it fast. You ready?
Fast?
Yeah. Are you ready?
All right, I guess.
Reactive Ducky, you're
Reactive
the one.
You make Redux so much fun.
Reactive Ducky, I love all the observing you do. Keep going.
Reactive Ducky, joy of joys.
When I squeeze you, you make noise. Oh no, it's supposed to be, you're my favorite async toy.
Well, I think if you squeeze observables, they make noise too. So there's that. Reactive Ducky, you're my very best friend. It's true.
That was amazing.
How much would I have to pay you guys to go try out for America's Got Talent with that act?
Oh my God. You wouldn't have to pay
us much.
You'd have to pay Tracy not to do that, probably.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. I'm still trying to get Ben to write the entire Spice Girls song, with me, but we got like partial lyrics for Angular wannabe Spice Girls.
I'm just thankful that this new building at Netflix has soundproof booths that I can sit in.
Which means I can make you sing more.
Oh boy.
I just want to point out that Reactive Ducky probably only makes noise if there's an operator for it.
That's true. Well, you could make a noise operator, I suppose, but that would be a side effect. So.
Oh, it's a side effect?
Yeah, because you're.
So you need a do operator then.
Yeah.
See, I was listening.
Can you? Okay, so like if you were doing dad jokes or something, you can make like a fart operator and be like, "Oh, that was just my operator." Like, is that terrible?
Oh, you're better at dad jokes than I am.
As long as we name the fart operator Smooth, that'd be the smooth operator.
Okay, we can sing. Oh, this is good. This is another song we can make together.
Oh God, we're gonna make a song about farting in RxJS. Please don't.
Smooth operator.
Oh, God.
All right. I think we need to do some picks.
All right.
Joe. Oh, you want to go? Go ahead.
No. Go for it. Go for it.
I got to go first.
Yeah, lucky Joe.
I'm always the first one.
Yeah, now I make him go first because he complains about it.
All right. So my first pick is something I found out just today, and it's almost serendipitous that I found out about it today. And that is Wasim, and I hate to butcher his last name, Shegram.
Oh, you're stealing my pick.
Oh, I'm so happy that I get to steal this pick.
Okay.
But anyway, he made this Google Home thing where he talks to it and asks it about RxJS. And is it your voice that's coming back at him, or is it?
No, it says its name is Ben. If you can get your microphone up to your it's really good. It's really good. You should try to get the sound from his video into
and
this
the really
podcast,
awesome thing is you'll say make me an observable, and it'll say congratulations, you're an observable.
Yeah. It is like he programmed my cheesy personality into it though. That's good.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. So there's a video where he does this, and I'll post a link to the video. It was a tweet actually that he links the video where he's doing it. It was so hilarious. And he's asking it questions about RxJS operators, and it's giving him the help. It's so cool. So way to go, Wasim, for being so.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm a little disappointed that I'm disappointed that you picked that because that was my top pick because I loved it. And then I'm also disappointed that I just got an Alexa, so I can't use that. I'm gonna have to live vicariously through my friends that have Google Home, I guess.
Yeah, it's too cool. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So then I'm gonna pick that. I'm also gonna pick my NG2 fundamentals course because definitely by the time you hear this, it'll be out. And so check that out if you're interested in learning Angular 2 or the framework formerly known as Angular 2 if you really love Igor and want to do everything that he tells you to do, which is don't call it Angular 2, just call it Angular. And those are my picks.
All right. Well, I'll jump in with a couple of picks. The first pick I have is the microphone I'm using now. And it's kind of it's not an enthusiastic pick, but I have these Shure SM58 microphones that I bought. I took them to Microsoft Connect, and then I also use them to record podcasts with my kids because I don't want them to use the $300 microphones. I'd much rather have them use the $100 microphones. Well, my $300 microphone, the Heil PR40, finally died. I actually saw a few reviews on iTunes where people were complaining about the sound quality. That was me. Sorry. So I sound much better now, but not, as nice as I would like to sound. And I'm working on that. But anyway, so yeah. So I'm using a Shure SM58 right now to fill in while I'm waiting for a new microphone to arrive at my door. And it works okay. It sounds good. I also switched off of my 16-channel mixer back onto my 8-channel mixer because it was also generating noise in the podcast. So, yeah. So I'm pretty happy with it. The mixer is a Xenyx. That's XENYX 802. And it's awesome. So I'm going to pick those. And then I'm also just going to remind people that JS Remote Conf is coming up. You can still get tickets. At this point, when this gets released, you will have missed the early bird and the call for proposals. But come and listen. We're going to have some terrific speakers, and we're going to talk about some awesome stuff around JavaScript. So come check it out. I'm also doing Freelance Remote Conf the next month. And I think we have iOS and Ruby coming up after that, if you're interested in those. So anyway, those are my picks. Tracy, do you have some picks?
Yeah, totally. I'll do my fun one first. I, for some reason, got really obsessed with cooking for the past, probably since Thanksgiving. So I started a food blog, I think on Monday. Was that yesterday? And it's called foodcss.com because I really like plating. So if you go to foodcss.com, you can find some cool recipes. But more exciting is my adventure into like plating ridiculous things. Like I can make meatloaf look really pretty, apparently. And then my second pick is going to be Joe and I's NG cruise. So early bird tickets just ended, but we just announced the full set of speakers. So we're going to have Jeff Cross and Victor Savkin doing keynotes and a bunch of other fun things. So if you want to come on a cruise to the Caribbean, come play with us at ngcruise.com.
That sounds like so much fun. If you're into cooking, I actually have scheduled a demo at CES with a company that has smart kitchen appliances.
Ooh, what is it?
It's called Gourmia. And they have like 6 appliances that you can control from your phone. So I'm gonna go check it out.
Like
whenever you said like smart kitchen appliances, I just imagined being chased out of my kitchen by a microwave.
I know, right? It's gonna be cool. I'm going down to Las Vegas tomorrow, and I'm gonna be down there for 4 days looking at all the new latest tech. And yeah, that's gonna be some of it. So if you're listening to this after it's been released, I've already come and gone, and it's probably on my YouTube channel.
Gourmet, they have a sous vide machine, so I'm gonna put a blog post on how to sous vide duck soon because I love sous vide duck.
Heard of one of these before, and Jafar Hussein just got one, and he doesn't shut up about it. Like he thinks it's the coolest thing in the world.
Because it's the most delicious thing in the world.
I guess.
Tracy, you can come cook at my house anytime you want.
Yeah, totally. I need more friends in Raleigh. If you guys are in Raleigh, you should look me up on the internet because I need more friends to cook for, which sounds strange, but it's true.
All right, Ben, what are your picks?
Let's see. Well, my top pick was already taken, which is Wasim.
Joe!
Thing. Thanks a lot, Joe. But if I had a second place pick, it probably should be close to the top. Is RX Workshop. Again, it's the workshops that I run. Tracy and I have put together. They're online. They're in person. We have different events at different times, obviously, for those. And I'm really excited about it because I just love running RxJS workshops. So it's a lot of fun because I try to get as personal as I can with people and answer any questions that they have. Tracy's come up with some really good ideas for people to ask questions kind of like privately over Slack in a way. So if people are a little bit nervous about raising their hand in front of a crowd of other developers or something like that, we can get anonymized questions up to me, and I tend to answer those. But I really love reactive programming. So I'm really excited to get out there and try to, instill as much knowledge as I can into other people. So hopefully they can go back to their companies or whatever and kind of spread the knowledge a bit more. Reactive programming, it's on a hockey stick sort of upswing right now as far as popularity, but there's still a lot for people to learn. So
I think we should also commit to singing one song at RX Workshop every single time we do it. So that's done.
Of course you think that. I can already see she's drafting up contracts right now to make sure that I do that. Let's see, other picks. You can get out on GitHub. TC39 has an org on GitHub. I recommend going out there and checking out all of the different repos for different proposals that are out. The ES observable proposal is it's really important. It's important for what RxJS is doing. It's important for the web. I recommend people go out and read that stuff and kind of see some of the reasoning why observables work the way they do. It's pretty interesting. You can even go out and look at the now defunct promise cancellation spec. It was pretty interesting as well. A lot of interesting conversations around that. And then another plug for Redux observable. If you're using Redux or you're into React, or you're actually using like Redux with anything else, you could use Redux with Angular 2. There's a lot of people that do that. And you want to get into reactive programming, or you know some RxJS already, I recommend Redux Observable. It's a really lightweight middleware. And what we found with apps that we applied it to here at Netflix is that in React apps in particular, you end up with all your components kind of being stateless, because not only have you moved all the synchronous logic out to Redux, but you've moved a lot of the async logic out to Redux Observable. So it's a pretty powerful and interesting tool. So I recommend people go check that out as well. Also, it has little animated spinny ducks, it's like a derivative of 3 ducks and
3 ducks, Redux.
Yeah, it's the RxJS logo colors, and yeah, it's pretty amazing.
All right. So can you let us know where to follow you on Twitter and when you and Tracy are releasing your first album?
Well, Tracy will be the album front. You can find me on Twitter at my name, which is just at Ben Lesh. Well, my name isn't at, but you find me at Ben Lesh on Twitter. So
we should release that by the end of the year. It could be one of our New Year's resolutions.
Tracy, can they find you on Twitter? Can anyone not find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Lady Elite on Twitter.
She's like a beacon for the web development community.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you both for coming. We'll catch everybody next week.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
That was fun. Hey there, this is Charles Max Wood, and I just wanted to talk to you really briefly about Freelance Remote Conf. I'm putting on a conference for people who want to go freelance or who are freelance, and bringing in some of the experts from the Freelancer Show to talk to you about how to find clients, how to collect money, how to build your business, how to specialize, and much, much more. So if you're thinking about going freelance, or you're already freelance and want to hear from the experts on how to go, become, or grow your freelancing business, then by all means, come check us out at freelanceremoteconf.com.